What's up? Thanks for watching. I wanted to give you guys a quick little update on my racket update, I guess, my racket journey update. Wanted to take the camera outside because it's such a nice day and I did my last two videos inside, so I figured why not sit outside a little bit. So I actually have three rackets. The one that I broke the strings on most recently is in my stringing machine. Maybe you saw it in the other two videos that I uploaded, but it's the VCore 98 Plus again. And I made a video on why I'm selling that racket a while ago, but I'm kind of back on it for now. See if I like it. And I also have here the VCore 100 Plus, which I really never gave a chance. So this is my first time getting to another racket. So I actually don't have much of an opinion on this so far. I've just hit with it a couple times and haven't really developed much of an opinion. But I'm going to give it a chance, and I have a pretty developed opinion on the Blackout 300 XTD, which is the extended Solinco blackout racket, which I have probably the most experience on this. Most recently, I hit with the VCore 98 for quite some time a while ago, so I definitely have a lot more time and history with that racket, but most recently I feel like I know this racket better than any of them. So yeah, this is just a video on where I'm at with my racket journey. I have kind of crossed a lot of rackets off of my list. If you see my review videos, I guess you will get a pretty clear idea of what those rackets are. And I've tried quite a few kind of recently in the last few months, and I've done review videos on some of them, not all of them, like the Pure Aero VS. I did not do a review on that racket, but I very quickly realized I was not a fan of that racket at all. I didn't even make a video about that racket. I hit with it once, and very quickly I was just like, oh man, I don't even want to bother, to be honest. So I didn't. But for now, yeah, I'm just going to talk about the three rackets that I have, and maybe a little bit about the rackets that kind of got me to this point. So a racket that I sold a long time ago, and I bring this racket up a lot because it was a really important one for me, it was the EZO 98 Plus. That was kind of my first racket into the direction, I would say, of extended length rackets. I actually had this Head Gravity Pro. I got a pro stock version of that racket that was uncut at 27.7 inches long, and that for me was a really great experience. But at some point during that racket, I felt like it just wasn't giving me enough power. Like I felt that maybe on the top 10 or 15% of my power, it would just keep flexing and wouldn't really return much. And I missed that. So I got the EZO 98 Plus, mostly because that was one of the only other decent rackets that was extended length at the time. I guess they must have had a VCore 98 Plus of that older model, but it just wasn't really on my radar at the time. Again, I was kind of dipping my toes into the extended length stuff. I was really fixated on the idea, and I still don't really see myself going back. But yeah, I had those two rackets for a while, and everybody said they liked how I was playing better with the EZO 98, and I definitely appreciated the power. And I didn't want to buy another Head Gravity Pro stock racket because those are super expensive, but I ultimately did feel, again, like the power at the end of it just wasn't quite there. But the Head Gravity is a cool racket. It's like a nice 18 by 20. It's got an unusual head size, or shape, I should say. So you kind of get an interesting blend of control, but you still get a lot of spin and some decent power. It's an interesting racket. I definitely liked it, but I just felt like it wasn't the best for my game at the end of the day. So yeah, not with that racket anymore. But that was a few years ago that I parted ways with that guy. So the reason that the 98 was such an important one for me is because that racket turned out to be like ridiculously powerful, and it took a little bit of time to realize that, but it got to a point where I just felt like so often I'd hit a ball out and just look at my racket like, what the heck was that, you know? Come on. I also feel like the touch on that racket isn't great, like just the ball connectivity or something, maybe the sensation or feedback. I just felt a little bit numb with the EZO 98, but it was kind of all that was out there at the time, and I wanted to do what I could to make that racket work with me. So in an attempt to take some of the power down, I started going with thicker gauge strings. I went with 16 gauge strings, and I started stringing a little higher, and I looked for strings specifically that were very low powered. So I was putting like the lowest powered thick gauge polys in that EZO 98, and I still felt the way that I felt about it. But I was also stringing some other rackets that I ended up getting later with the same kind of string setup. So I had a VCore 98 Plus at the time alongside my EZO 98 Plus after I had sold my Gravity Pro. And it was mostly just those two rackets for a while. Those were my two main rackets, and maybe another one came into the picture, but ultimately would get phased out pretty quickly, and I'd stick with those two. And I think some of the Pure Aero Plus and maybe the Pure Drive Plus were examples of that at the time. They came in and they went pretty quickly, you know. I ended up selling both rackets not too long ago, the EZO 98 and the VCore 98, And the reasons for selling both were a little bit different, but in very, like, as simply as I can put it, the main reason was that the VCore 98 I felt like wasn't going through the ball as comfortably. I felt like it would get stuck on contact a little bit, and I felt like the E-Zone 98 I could just never get the control I wanted. It was always very often just too powerful, and I've done everything I could to take that back, and I just decided that this racket is super powerful and there's only so much I can do about it, and it frustrated me and annoyed me. So I got rid of both of those rackets. And after some time away from those rackets, I felt like, you know what, maybe I let the E-Zone 98 dictate too much about my experience with other rackets. Like, everything that I decided about strings and tension, I was kind of applying to the rackets that I tried after that, including the VCore 98. So I was putting the same thick gauges at higher tensions on the VCore 98 that I was on the E-Zone 98. And I just sort of realized eventually that maybe that is why I felt the way that I did about the 98 at the time, because I tried the VCore 95 and that racket felt kind of terrible going through the ball when I first strung it up. And I think I told you guys in a story what racket I had, which was the VCore 95, and what strings I put in it, and you guys told me very quickly, like, you want to put a thinner gauge string at a lower tension on that VCore 95 specifically. It's a very string sensitive racket. So I did, and that racket felt so much better, and it kind of made me appreciate how string sensitive a racket can be. So there's a lesson in there that is important for me, but I would also like to share with you guys, and it's just that, like, you really can't determine too much about a string overall or tension overall. A lot of these things are just so specific to the racket that you're using. And I think what felt really good in the E-Zone 98, which was really just like kind of stiff, dead, take away as much power as possible strings, it didn't really feel good, but it gave me more or less the results that I was hoping to achieve on the E-Zone 98. That maybe just didn't feel so good, or didn't complement the VCore 98 as well. So after some time away from those rackets and trying other ones, I feel like I kind of cleansed my palate, and I opened my mind again after trying 17 gauge strings because of other rackets that I had to do that for. And it made me think, maybe the VCore 98 is worth another try. And that's where I'm at with the VCore 98. I have it in my bag, so to speak. It's one of the rackets that I'm hitting with recently, and I've just I don't really have too much time with it right now, but I've been hitting with it, and it came as a demo with some reasonably fresh strung tour bite at 17 gauge, which is one of those strings that I can always kind of play with and I know pretty well. And I was like, I don't hate this racket. And there were moments where I kind of felt the same thing, but I'm going to give it more time because the twist rate on that racket is a little bit lower. So I think when you hit hard and you hit sort of flat through the ball, that racket might just feel a little bit less comfortable than a racket like the E-Zone would, which is maybe more designed to go through the ball. It does have a higher twist weight, and I've been looking into those kinds of specs a little bit more, and I understand how that translates into the feedback you get from the ball, the strings, and the racket, just how it feels going through the ball. So yeah, maybe that's something that I can just expect, or maybe I'll learn to hit through the ball differently in a way that works for that racket better, or maybe something about the strings will change how that feels. We'll see. I need more time to really figure that out, but I got the VCore 98. I have it as a demo. It's a plus. I'm not going to keep saying VCore 98 plus, but all the rackets I'm hitting with are extended versions, and if they're not, then I probably modified them with the extended butt cap. But that being said, I bought the Solinco Blackout XTD. This is one of the rackets. The VCore 100 Plus is one of the rackets, and the 98 Plus, which I need to string, is the other racket. So I got 3 rackets right now that kind of feel like my rackets. And the one that I know the least is the VCore 100 Plus. I just figured if the 98 Plus is worth trying, then maybe the VCore 100 Plus is worth trying. Kind of slurred through that word. But, they're not too different maybe. I, on paper, maybe don't like the VCore 100 as much. There's a part of me that is resistant to larger head sizes. There's a part of me that would just never go past 100, but 100 is at the end of my limits. Why not welcome that sometimes? And I did end up trying the Pure Drive, which is 100, so I might as well try the VCore 100 Plus as well, because the pattern is still a little bit more dense than the Pure Drives and the Aero Pros or Pure Arrows. I don't really know this racket very well, but I'm getting to. We'll see. I wonder how different it'll be. I don't really know. As for the Solinco Blackout, I would kind of describe it to be like a more comfortable Pure Drive. But the more I get to know this racket, the more I kind of focus on the things that I maybe don't love about the racket. For example, it really does not feel so good at net. It feels very floppy at net, and just the general sensation of volleying with this racket isn't so good. I enjoy it on the baseline and I get along with it pretty well, but it really just feels like a more comfortable pure drive in a lot of ways. And I think I try to distinguish it from not being that before, but if I'm to use as little words as possible to describe how this racket is, that's how I would describe it. Obviously it's not a pure drive that is just, you know, more comfortable necessarily, but that's a really good way to think about it at the same time. The thing is too, I don't know if you can tell on camera, but these are both 1619 100s, and the Yonex drill pattern is quite a bit more dense than the Solinco one. There's a part of me that never liked how open the Solinco racket was. It just makes me feel like, you know, 16 by 19s are already kind of, the strings don't last very long in them for me. They're already kind of like a string breaker pattern. But on top of that, the Solinco really just opens that up even more than a lot of rackets. But you know, it's up there with the pure drive and so on, and the pure arrow. I don't know if you can tell here, but the bottom cross on the VCore 100 is maybe like almost a centimeter higher from the bottom than the Solinco, and it's about the same on the top. So from the top cross and the bottom main, I would say that the density is already about a centimeter more dense, and on the mains maybe it's about half a centimeter more dense. So overall the density on the VCore 100 is noticeable just by looking at it, and to me that definitely expresses a pretty significant difference in the string lifespan. And that's a thing for me, honestly. Like I break these strings every 2 to 3 hits, and that's often for me. If I can get like 4 or 5, that would be so nice. And this one definitely has more promise of delivering that kind of lifespan to me than the Solinco one does. And this is the 100. The 98 is even a little more dense than that. So I used to be a really 18 by 20 type of guy, and that was mostly because I like the lifespan of the strings, but I just like the idea also of stringing lower tensions and not having too much of a trampoline effect when you don't want. But it's fine. I can live with 1619 by as well, but I'm probably going to prefer the more dense ones as opposed to the more open ones. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, and that's what I look for when I get a racket, and that's how I got to the ones that I have now, the VCore 98 Plus, the VCore 100 Plus, and the Solinco Blackout 300, which I actually bought. So yeah, that's where I'm at, and it's just kind of a matter of time before I probably decide between one of these 3 rackets. I have a feeling that I won't be choosing this guy, but I'm glad that I got it. And it's a really unique and cool looking racket up close. It's a nice matte black. I think a lot of people would like this racket, honestly. If you do like a pure drive or pure arrow, but you want something a little different, a little more comfortable, this is a really, really good choice. A really good choice. I will say that I think that the pure drive volley is a little bit nicer, but this one is much more comfortable, and I think it generates a very similar amount of spin. There's not a twist weight spec online, but maybe it even feels like the twist weight is a little bit lower on this one, but it's an extremely maneuverable racket. I really don't have anything bad to say about this racket. It's just a matter of compromises, you know? But yeah, it's a beautiful racket, and it's something a little different. Yeah, if you kind of want like a pro staff looking racket, but plays kind of like a comfortable pure drive might, and it's extended length, check this guy out. Check this guy out. Yeah, so anyway, that's my racket update video for now. You guys can just stay tuned and I guess see what racket I choose, and I'll talk again in a video I'll release soon about which backhand I chose and why, because I've definitely prioritized one over the other recently. So I have my reasons and I will share them in a future video. So yeah, if you guys enjoy the content, please like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in a future video. Hope it's a nice day where you're at.